discussing how planning embeds the healthy places and how do we plan for those healthy places that we need in Scotland. And specifically today we'll be looking at how planners can help more towards a 20-minute neighbourhood. Our awareness of the importance of 20-minute neighbourhoods has obviously escalated in the last 6 months, as we've all been very much aware of our place outside our door. But it's also come far more into the foreground with its mention and promotion and support for the ambition of a 20-minute neighbourhood within the programme for government that came out a matter of weeks ago. In that, stated a support to local government to deliver on that ambition. So it's perfect timing that we have a session drilling down today on that topic. I'm Irene Beautyman. I am the convener of RTPI Scotland during 2020. In my day job, I work between local government at the Improvement Service and Public Health Scotland, so also working with health practitioners with that shared ambition around health and place and spatial planning and how we link up around that. Our programme this week has, as I say, all been about healthy places, and we've had a lot of strong moves about the need to be talking more across different practitioner and professional levels, between planning, between health, between community planning. And I think one of the biggest things that's pulled that together was yesterday when we had Angela Scott, Chief Exec from Aberdeen City, sharing her Road to Damascus moment about the importance of planning when she read what the social determinants of health are and found that they were about the environment that people live, work and play in. Something in planning, we've been aware of Harry Burns making his comments in the past. This is continuing in Scotland. Our health record is not great across the whole of Western Europe, and the differences in your healthy life expectancies across Scotland vary depending on where you live, whether that be a deprived area or a non-deprived area. Today I'm very grateful to be joined by leaders in this area who have experience in the work and what is actually happening on the ground at the moment, and will also be sharing their thoughts and experience on just how do we move forward with these 20-minute neighbourhoods and the support and the subsequent action that we need to be taking. So I'll be being joined by Daisy Narayanan from Sustrans, Stuart Hay from Director of Living Street Scotland, and Forbes Barron from City of Glasgow Council. I keep wanting to say Edinburgh instead of Glasgow. I think I'm really for a unified council between the two. It keeps coming out of my mouth, so that must be where I am coming from. I want to just give a little bit of context to what is planning's role in all of this. Place, we mention a lot. We talk a lot, we talk about the importance of it and the importance of place-based approaches. A 20-minute neighbourhood is crucially one of those place-based approaches. But what it is looking at is the fact that every place is made up of that physical environment that as planners we shape, the people in the environment that as health practitioners we seek to keep healthy rather than them becoming ill and having to treat them. And then there is always the economic and economy environment within every place, such as who is investing where and into what jobs do we have. We're all invested in place in some form or other, simply to even keep a roof over our heads if we're lucky enough to have that. And the role of planning within that is how do we interact within that? Do we make sure that our interventions have positive consequences? Are we aware if they're having unintended negative consequences? We need to work together in order to identify any potential for negative impacts and address them up front before we take action. So as we move forward today, we will have our conversations, then we will go on to an amount of time for questions, and there will be a questions box for you to submit in there. I urge you to do so as we go along, because that point in the programme we tend to, time does run away with ourselves. We've been very high level so far in our approach yesterday, looking very strategically at this joining together, a strong ask from Public Health Scotland that they be part of that collaboration with local government and in particular with planning authorities and with the planning profession. But equally, it's been interesting that the conversations. Sue Mans joined us from the RTPI president, joined us yesterday as well, and had high level reflections on the importance of getting to a sort of a sweet spot around getting the right density to achieve the right mix of land uses and the right means of moving around in between areas as well. If we get that critical mass, it allows those amenities, those services, those active travel, public transport and everything else to fall into place. I think the 20-minute neighbourhood will be something that that ticks that box, that actually is seeking quite directly to achieve that. However, I shall hand over to our speakers in order to give us a little bit more of their concept of what a 20-minute neighbourhood is, and then how they feel Scotland can be moving forward with that. So I shall hand firstly to Daisy Narayanan. As I say, Daisy is Director of Urbanism at Sustrans. Many of us, including myself, will know her for the work she did on a secondment to City of Edinburgh Council, where she really moved forward the transport choices that Edinburgh were making, and they continue to make, and I've certainly for myself been working with them on those choices and that role of a 20-minute neighbourhood in progressing those choices as well. It's interesting because Sustrans, I think we all feel, is very much purely an active travel charity, but I think if you drill down, and it's great that I know from speaking to Daisy that Sustrans do drill down to the fact that if you're looking at using travel to make places and people happier and healthier, then you've got to get into land use. You simply can't avoid it. However, I shall stop at that and hand over to Daisy. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks for having me today to speak. I think it's such a fantastic series of events and sessions that RTPI has put together, and it's a genuine privilege to be here and talk about 20-minute neighbourhoods. As Irene said, I'm Daisy Narayanan. I'm the Director of Urbanism at Sustrans. And just before I start, just to caveat everything by saying that I'm not a planner at all. I call myself a recovering architect. I graduated as an architect in India in 1997. But over the past few years, I've worked as an urban designer and within sustainable transport over the past decade, and more doing work around climate crisis and how planning and transport and urban design and urbanism and the climate and public health, we can all collaborate to shape our cities and towns better. So I know today we're talking about 20-minute neighbourhoods, and for the past, as Irene said, this is really high on the agenda at the moment. And for the past, couple of weeks, 3 weeks, I've been talking about this at various forums. So I'd like to start with an apology if some of you have already seen what I've said or some of my slides. Hopefully, I can put a different lens to this, given that this is about planning and how I see planning's role in making change happen. Because we need to accelerate change, to transform our cities and towns in Scotland as we start recovering from the pandemic and look to the bigger challenges of the climate crisis that hasn't gone away. To transform our towns and cities, to make them low carbon, the process to make them more livable. And today I'd really like to explore whether the 20-minute neighbourhood principle or the 15-minute city or the 15-minute community, there's various ways that we talk about what is essentially the same principle, and whether that principle can ensure that our towns and cities are safer, more inclusive, more sustainable, and more resilient. So let me see if I can figure this out. There you go. I hope you don't mind indulging me. I'd like to take a little step back and understand my own journey with using the 20-minute neighbourhood lens on that. I grew up in India and Indonesia, and I've had the good fortune to have lived in many global cities across the world. I worked in Singapore, I lived in America for a while, and in London. And since 2004, I've made Edinburgh my home. But my values and my understanding of place and place design was shaped by my summers spent in this ancestral home of mine in Kerala, which is in the south of India, the picture over there. We swam in the river, we got mangoes from our orchard when we were hungry, and I've talked about this before. But thinking about it, we walked along paddy fields with our uncles and aunts to the local shops to get street food. We watched all-night classical Indian dances and music at the local temple, which is 5 minutes away. activity, music, dance, shopping, place of worship, community hub, all within that 15, 20-minute walk away. It was a real 20-minute neighborhood. And over the past 3 years, again, I've been reflecting over how much the quality of my life and has improved or has not been good based on the quality of place and how easily and conveniently and affordably I could get around where I was living. So in Bombay and Singapore, for example, I walked because that was the easiest way to get, to most of what I needed. But I used public transport. It was safe, traveling late at night in Bombay and Singapore, both safe cities to be in. In America, I lived in a beautiful little town called Huntsville, Alabama. There's a picture there. And it was so beautiful, but to get anywhere, I had to hop in my car, to go to the gym, to buy a pint of milk to the corner shop. There were no pavements. So I wasn't in a good place physically or mentally. And I think the dependency on my car played a huge part in that, in how my quality of life was affected over there. In Edinburgh and London, I discovered the joy of cycling, getting to places quicker, feeling healthier, both mentally and physically. So for me, on reflection, where my life gave me a choice of living within that 15, 20-minute community, I realized that I have felt at my most healthy, my most active, and at my most productive. So my work in Sustrans, I try to reflect that within what I do in Sustrans. It is a sustainable transport charity, but the strand of work that I lead is about livable places, livable cities and towns. And for me, that I'm keen to explore what it is that makes a city or a town, a place livable. For me, it's about connections. It's about physical connections, digital connections, but most importantly, it's about human connections to each other. Sorry, there you go. So, we've spent a fair amount of time trying to understand what that means for Sustrans and where Sustrans fits into the wider conversation, where we fit within the ecosystem of healthier places and livable cities and towns. So for me, it is about putting people at its very heart of, having what you need, just a short walk away, celebrating our identity, the roots of where of places that we live, work and play, a place where, everyone can move around in a healthy way, clean air, green space for everyone to live and play in. And by play, I mean not just children playing or play parks. It's about, the joy and the delight that we get in our places as adults as well. And just picking that theme of having most of what you need, just a short walk away. For me, that is key, ensuring that people are able to access their everyday needs, including food, education, medicine, within a 20-minute walk. And that then would support more journeys made by walking, cycling, or wheeling, and minimize journeys made by car, especially short trips that we make in our cities and towns. Places like cars are guests on our residential streets, exceptions around our schools. It means that children can then play out as it feels safer. They can walk and cycle to school. And then in turn, places become more equitable, where our roads are then kept free for those who truly need to drive. That then becomes a truly inclusive place. So over the past 3 years, all of us, Irene, and Craig, and so many of us across the work that we're doing here, George and Stuart, who are going to speak next, we've all been involved in collaborative discussions around how we put a place lens on the quality of our towns and cities, environmental, social, economic reasons for creating better places and people-friendly places, livable cities and towns. And COVID-19 genuinely, in my opinion, brought a really sharp focus and urgency to accelerate that change. We saw examples of rapid action taken across the globe. But for me, it's also shown that when we are faced with something as huge as a pandemic, communities come together. You get to know your neighbors. We've got a renewed understanding and explanation for the joys that we feel of living locally. Hearing bird song, that's the kind of thing that we were talking about during lockdown, getting to know your neighbors better. It's forced many of us to work from home, but recent surveys shown that 72% of Scottish employers expect increased demand for home working, and over 35% say that they will be looking to grant these requests for people working from home. The way we work, the way we live our lives are changing completely in front of our eyes. And it's also brought a sharp focus on the economy. So community services, small business, high streets is a priority. So reimagining our urban centers has to be part of the conversation right now. And I'm so glad that we are doing this, and this Healthy Places seminars that are being run is so timely right now. And as Irene mentioned, Program for Government has the 20-minute neighbourhood, living locally right at the heart of the discussion for the next year within Program for Government. And I find that really interesting, to find the leader of a country stand up on Parliament and talk about place and placemaking has genuinely been, I've sent it on to my colleagues in India and my friends back in Singapore, and to showcase the conversations that we're having here at national and local level, politically and in civic society. It's really, really exciting time for us, I think. I'll come back very quickly to Edinburgh, and Irene mentioned the City of Edinburgh Council project that I led called the City Centre Transformation Project. And, we were looking at some of these issues around congestion and traffic pollution, and, identity and tourism, residents, all of those conversations that were happening around place, what kind of place we want our city centre to be in Edinburgh, were happening 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and conversations have been accelerated since then. As part of city centre transformation, what I find interesting as part, in this conversation is the fact that when I was seconded into the city council, I was not seconded into the transport team, even though I came from Sustrans, a transport charity. I was embedded within the planning team, the spatial policy team. And to me, that is key. We have to make sure that when planning and transport speak together, integrated right from the outset, that's when magic happens. That's when change happens. Some of the conversations were really robust, because when you have that vision-led approach of what a place could look like through the planning lens, but then you also have the technical expertise that that transport brings to what our streets could look like. Those conversations can be feisty, and I think those are the conversations that we need to have going forward if we are to make a 20-minute neighbourhood approach successful. And I'll just give you a quick run through of what the city centre transformation did. And it was looking at not just our streets, but looking at biodiversity, how we start to change how people experience the place within the city centre. And as I said, COVID is accelerating that. We've already seen Waverley Bridge in Edinburgh, just as you come out of the station, completely transformed into a place where it's no longer vehicle dominated, but truly given back to people. And now we can look at collecting data and seeing what happens to that space and how we want it to look in the future as we shape our city going forward. But I want to end on a provocation, I suppose, very quickly on how do you make change happen? Because when change happens quickly, and we are talking about making a 20-minute neighbourhood principle deliverable on the ground, we need to make sure that, how do you make sure it's inclusive? How do we make sure that as we work like this through screens, that we develop those relationships that need to empower communities? It's a time of uncertainty. Who pays for it? What kind of partnerships do we need? What resources do we need? And the discourse around low traffic neighborhoods and 20-minute neighborhoods can get quite toxic sometimes if you're looking online. So how do we make sure that that discussion is civil, first of all, and is good for everybody to be part of and to shape? So I would like to end, as I started reflecting on my personal journey, by reflecting on where I am right now. So we made a choice as a family to move back to Edinburgh City Centre when we had a growing family. As a trade-off for a big family house and a garden, we now live in the city centre in a tenement flat. But it's truly a magical 20-minute neighbourhood. Within my 20-minute radius, I have a castle, I have a parliament, I have an extinct volcano, incredible green spaces, including Prince Street Gardens. My children's schools are a 5-minute walk away. My workplace, if it opens, is a 20-minute cycle ride away. Shops, theatres, a cinema complex, a farmer's market. I'm so spoiled for choice. And for me, the challenge is, as we move towards this net zero future, we have to make that a norm. We have to make that choice a norm and not something that is a trade-off for families to make. So yes, very excited to be part of this and to listen to everybody else's thoughts on how we make this happen together.
Lovely, Daisy. Thank you so much for that and for sharing your journey that's brought you to Edinburgh, to what has become an even more of a 20-minute and healthy environment, thanks to your input into it as well. And thanks to the inspiration of elected members, a key role there, and the planning service within Edinburgh also. And later on we'll hear from Forbes about what has been happening in Glasgow as well. I had to laugh when you were talking there about the human connections. I love that, because the word I was struggling to find when I was talking about what Sue Mans had raised yesterday was about finding that sweet spot of density in order to enable mixed uses and connections. And I've always thought of them as being physical connections and some form of walking, cycling, transport. But you're absolutely right, it's social connections that are crucial there as well. I really loved that. It's also interesting, we talk about 20-minute neighbourhoods, and I know, Daisy, you and I have had these conversations about a crucial aspect of them is that we are creating environments everywhere, not just in city centres. We are looking to create these environments everywhere, so that there's more of a reliance on means of getting around that don't involve the car. 30% of our population don't have a car, and it's predominantly those that are living in the more deprived areas. So there's a huge connection between 20-minute neighbourhoods and reducing the inequalities that we have in Scotland, not just health, but also poverty, child poverty, and so on as well. So it's fantastic that it's come to the fore so much. Sustrans have been leading on that prior to even coming into the programme for government, and really prior to it coming to the fore as a result of the pandemic. I loved the what you had up for Waverley Bridge, saying, you know, it's unfortunate, isn't it, that we put up road ahead closed. I saw a slide a few weeks ago where it actually said road ahead open for people. I thought, yes, that's what we need. It would just cost a lot to get all those signs made, but hey ho. So thank you, Daisy, very much. I'm going to come on now to Stuart Hay, Director of Living Streets in Scotland. So Living Streets is a UK charity also, and it promotes everyday walking that is free from, therefore, congested roads, but therefore, straight into what we're talking about all week, reduces the risk of preventable illness and social isolation. When we are out and we are about and we are walking or we are cycling, or even walking to that local bus stop, it means that we're not just getting physically active, but we make those all-important connections. Eye contact in the first hour of your day has such an impact on mental health. So for Stuart, it's certainly about making walking a natural choice. I like, again, that use of that terminology there, that natural choice. You're out in nature, but it's just the thing you choose to do when you step out the front door rather than go for that car. So Stuart, I'll hand over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real honour to address the conference. I did do a planning degree. I didn't quite complete my year in practice, but I have used my planning degree and the skills it gave me for the last 20 years, which is it's an absolute fantastic grounding in terms of everything you need to know about public policy. I'll start with a quick commercial, actually, for Leith Army Navy stores. This is a pair of laces, actually, that I got at lunchtime, and I got them within 20 minutes of my house. So that's fantastic. It shows that I live in one of the densest areas in Scotland. So yeah, I do live in a 20-minute neighbourhood. So I'll quickly kick things off. So Living Streets has been around for a long time. It's been around since 1929, and it was really there because the car was causing so many problems, so many deaths and things. And we've had a lot of work over the years to get speed limit, zebra crossings, which is now our logo, these sort of things. And today we work on everyday walking, a big focus on getting kids walking to school, working with communities to improve their streets, and also to influence public policy, which is why I'm here today. So it's a great opportunity for me. Going back a little bit, let's go back to 1963. Famous Edinburgh planner Colin Buchanan. He saw this coming. He told us what was going to happen. He said you have a choice between controlling cars or a massive degradation in environmental quality. And he came up with two solutions. You either design out the cars, or you really sort of rip up and start again. And actually what we've done as a society is we've kind of fudged it. We've where we have actually redesigned, it's been a bit of a disaster, and you can see that in some parts of the new towns and things that are really car dominated. But that's basically what we've been doing for the last 60 years. And there's an inconvenient truth here. Actually, what we've got here is it's a system that's perfectly designed to get the results it gets. That's Donald Berwick, who actually was brought in by Obama to look at American healthcare, but it's a very appropriate quote here. And the other sad fact is the function of any system is actually to ensure its reputation. So we've got a real challenge here in changing things around, and 20-minute neighbourhoods come into that. And this is what you've got. I could give you all manner of statistics about what's going on in Scottish society and the problems that land use planning and living the car has created. That's from 2007, absolutely applicable today. So let's look at what can we do about it. Let's start off with, well, actually it's really just about planning. There's Patrick Geddes. This is about planning a neighbourhood, a local scale, the sort of thing Patrick Geddes was talking about in the old town earlier in the last century. Slight take on it, and it is really about living without a car for your daily needs. Maybe there's things during once a week you might need to drop into a car, but it's about your daily needs, and that's really about housing, the facilities you need. And increasingly, as COVID has shown, it's about outdoor exercise and green spaces. That's utterly vital. And if there's anything good's come out of COVID, it's to recognise that. And what are these sort of needs? Well, groceries and food, obviously. Green space I've mentioned. Schools are really a bedrock of our community. They're the hubs. We need local schools to make this work. We need social and community spaces, and that's where groups can get together. We need more informal spaces where you can get together in restaurants, those sort of things. One thing that nobody's really mentioning, but we need to tackle, is picking up goods. Where the big growth in traffic is not actually people in personal cars, it's actually little vans running around delivering stuff for Amazon. So we need to build that into, we can't have everything delivered to everyone's door. We need to get actual people out walking to pick things up from somewhere. And we need the digital connections. And finally, public transport. And I should mention that really with public transport, we need to be much closer than 20 minutes. We found in our research, and this is backed up, that people really only walk about 10 to 15 minutes max before they give up. And that's understandable. You really only walk, you've got to wait for the bus, then you've got to spend your time on the bus before you actually get to your destination. So actually, 20 minutes is a bit of a misnomer. It's a good soundbite, but actually we're probably looking at something slightly different. This is some great data that was done in a walking survey by Paths for All earlier in the year. And this sort of illustrates where people will actually walk to and how long it actually takes in a typical neighbourhood. And these are typical neighbourhoods on average. And there's quite a lot of stuff that's in people's walking distance. But it does start to break down actually when you look at more specialist shops, GPs, secondary schools. Although you can still see that about 2/3 of the kids can get there with under the 20 minutes. Based on this data. And then finally to work, people probably walk half an hour to work, but actually it's near 50 minutes before you can get to work. So we need to bring workplace, and we've got an opportunity here with people working from home to start tackling that. So it's a good opportunity. But yeah, don't get hung up on 20 minutes. Don't get up on the actual neighbourhood or drawing lines on maps. This is about a lifestyle that should be supported everywhere. Who is it for? I think we have to ask, because it's for everyone, and most people can walk 20 minutes, get 1 mile in 20 minutes. It's 10 minutes to a bus stop, as I've mentioned. We also have to consider people who don't walk that fast, and actually we're all getting slower. This is one of the challenges we face. So we really do need to think about other groups. And it's children who really need to have the freedom to get around their neighbourhood, and who don't need to be bussed everywhere in their parents' car. And it's people who drive as well, but don't really want to. There's some people who just like to drive. We're not going to get Jeremy Clarkson fixed on this, but there's a lot of other people, and it's small businesses who can really benefit from this. And again, COVID's shown that some of the heroes in this are the local corner shops who kept going through this. And finally, it is cyclists, but I would say less so, and that cyclists can get actually quite far in 20 minutes. So they're not really about compact. Cycling complements this. It's not really about cycling. And really we should be creating environments that it's safe to cycle in. So yeah, it should be safe just to cycle in an area. Moving on. And it's about planning for behaviour change. And I think we must look at this in a holistic sense. This is the ISM Behaviour Change Toolkit for the Scottish Government. I recommend everybody have a look at it. And we must get beyond just looking at infrastructure. We need to actually look at lifestyle in terms of what people's beliefs, the social setting, and how we change those attitudes. If you just try and shut off roads and things on them without actually thinking how it affects people, it's not going to get us very far, and that's some of the problems. So we have to really think about social marketing on this stuff. This brings us to spatial strategy. Where does this planning, and as Irene mentioned, this is really for everywhere except your remote rural areas, and there's something there. We need lots of stuff for remote rural areas, but we need to tackle city centres, and that's the type of work that Daisy's doing, and that's really about environmental quality, and it's also inviting families back into city centres as a nice place, a safe place to live. So that's quite important. And small towns actually are obviously walkable. Spent some time in Elgin this year, and yeah, it's very walkable, but it's not walkable because of the A96 runs through the middle of it. It's got massive severance issues, that sort of thing. So let's start getting these places connected up. Actually, some towns like that, the infrastructure is there, it just needs joined up, and we need to take some of the traffic out. And finally, the big tough nut to crack is really suburban areas. We need to get the density up, we need to get the number of services up, we need to get the connections up. We are starting from quite a low place, but we need some goals in doing this. One is to eliminate or replace short local car journeys, and if we're not doing that, then nothing else will succeed. It just won't happen. We won't get the environmental quality. And the second goal is really good planning. It's about actually not just about moving, it's about giving people an excuse to stay where they live, to enjoy it, to linger around. So this isn't all about movement. This is about place. And we've got some good policies, but they've not really got any bite, and I'm going to say a little bit about that in a second. So we need to get much more proactive in terms of planning. We can't leave, the market has not provided this over 20 years, and there's no reason it will provide this in the next 20 years unless we get more proactive on this. And that's including actually prescribing mixes of densities and that sort of thing. We need a bit of land reform here as well, and I think planning gets a bad rap for actually problems that are to do with the land market. It kind of deals with what is given, but actually being proactive and actually communities creating the facilities they need by getting the sites they need. And that includes creating new green spaces, and that's really important. And those sites are out there, but we need to create, the mechanisms are out there, but we need to up the ante on that. And we need to build local schools. We just need to stop building these big campuses. That has really undermined efforts to get kids walking to school. Well, this is the difficult bit, but we need to do it. We need to get proactive about parking control. And that means all new developments actually finding some mechanism. I'm thinking parking permits. If you get a new house, it comes with a parking permit, which maybe is a selling point actually. You get your parking if you want to park on street. You get that. And do we limit to one car only? I mean, these are the sort of discussions we need. Every time we create parking, we create congestion, we create pollution. So we need to go beyond our policies, and we need to creep out the controlled parking zones into the burbs if we're going to get this working. We do a lot of work on footway parking, and that's because we've not controlled parking, we've not controlled car ownership. We need to get the active travel quality up in terms of what are provided by developments and define it in both time to these links and the quality connection. And we just need to ban certain things. I saw there was a drive-through Greggs opened in Glasgow, and do we really think that that is going to help us with a climate emergency in a city that's having problems with obesity and traffic congestion and pollution? That's still happening in 2020. It just needs to stop. And finally, permeability. This is probably the last bit, is actually locking off some of this stuff to vehicles, but allowing non-motorised vehicles, and particularly people on foot, to get around easily. We've got a lot of work to do, really have. This is stuff I read at university just as I was finishing up, actually, MPPG 17, and it's telling us we really need to get a grip on transport and land use, and if we do, we can control traffic growth. Well, we've done none of that stuff now, and this is why we're in the problem we've got, and the policies have improved slightly, but we've not put them into practice. So we need this is not a policy question, this is a practice question. And I thought this was summed up really well last week by the chair of the Transport Planning Society, who said we failed, but he was right in the transport time. But what he said is that we need to be more honest in our assessment of the impact of schemes and be bolder in influencing advice. And if you're going to take one thing away, I think that's what we have to do, is to challenge the politicians. And we need to stop making silly mistakes. This is out in development on the southeast wedge of Edinburgh. really, really carbon-weighted environment, just recently built. It's 20 mile an hour, but people are not going to drive 20 mile an hour because it says, let's drive faster than that. If you've got a roundabout in your development, you failed. You've absolutely failed. If some people are bringing forward roundabouts, the place is for traffic. Some token public transport, one bus in a major development, and actually, if you were disabled, you can't actually get to the bus because there's no protection around there. And I've put a Vogan up there because they're quite famous for building roads. So we do need to work with the traffic planning fraternity and really reform them and get them talking about people and not cars. And look at all that tarmac. That's modern urban development for you out there. And this is another example. And there is a station, but you try crossing this road. I wouldn't let my 12-year-old daughter cross this road, and she's pretty streetwise. She lives in the city. Again, even less public transport provision. Just a terrible, dire environment. Everybody that's going to buy a house there is going to drive their cars. So we need to do much, much better than that. And here's my solution. You can do really technical stuff. But you could just say, can you actually go out and buy a toilet roll? Toilet rolls, as you can see, are quite important. If you get 15 minutes, you can go out and walk to a shop that will tell you a toilet roll. You're probably on the right track. If you can't do that, you shouldn't get planning permission. It's as simple as that. But some reasons to be cheerful. I'm just wrapping up now. Actually, I think the public's been ahead of where the development industry is. This is data that was collected by Paths for All. And people do want this stuff. They do want, 74% of people actually want to walk to the shop. 64% want bus services. And they want that more than actually cars. And bikes, as I say, is important, and it's a growing area, but it isn't actually going to drive this type of stuff. And it comes down to, this is stuff we must do. It's not stuff we should do, which is actually how it's written into policy at the moment. There's too many loopholes. We haven't been doing it because of that. So if we're serious about climate emergency, and the planning system can really make a big difference here, we must do this stuff. And I'm going to finish up there with a little positive note. And I think planning can be the hero here. There's Patrick Geddes, and there's a time machine. So let's break, if he was coming back here, what would he be saying to things? You know, a city is more than time, a place and time. It's a drama in time. So we need these sort of characters in planning to reassert themselves, to actually start planning. And I think 20-minute neighbourhoods is part of this, but actually it is really just about planning for people and not for cars. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much.
Stuart, thank you. Fantastic. Really good little quotes there, and I think I'll be pinching some of your slides as well. What comes to mind, you looked at all levels there, and a very big link there between looking at densities, prescribing densities, and buying a toilet roll, and that really brings it to home, because I think the issue around density is we don't get to the absolute practicalities of, if we build at very low traditional densities at 30 to 35 houses per hectare, then in order to get to a shop that will sell you that toilet roll, you will have to walk. A sizable number of those houses will have to walk more than 10-15 minutes in order to do that, because the housing is so spaced out. And that's where we get to such an important aspect that planning can be influencing, is what are those densities that we're seeking to achieve that mean that we can get that critical mass that allows us to have the shop that will sell the toilet roll, that can have enough people walking past it and buying the toilet roll. But I love the toilet roll instead of the pint of milk, so much more COVID related. Right, I'm going to pass now to Forbes, who is the Chief Planner at Glasgow City Council. I'll get the name right for a change. Over to you, Forbes.
For having me and inviting me along today. Really pleased to be here in a virtual sense. I'd like to focus in my presentation today, or a few comments, upon the challenges and opportunities in achieving the 20-minute neighbourhood by reference to Glasgow. I think it's important, obviously, in terms of Glasgow being a much larger urban area, that we look towards the necessary layers of scale. And now, along with the individual collection of places, which all require resilience and place quality, there's that layering there. So I think our own city urbanist refers to that as being the everyday city, I think, which is the 20-minute neighbourhood. the metropolitan city in the case of Glasgow, which is the centre of a third of the population and economy of the country, and the international city. So it serves as a prompt, this particular slide, that Glasgow is a collective of everyday city of places. We have 44 town centres. And in understanding that hierarchy of connection, we have to think about the digital and transport connectivity at the international and metropolitan level, and perhaps more upon walking and cycling, and increasingly digital at that 20-minute level. Now, they are all relevant to our well-being and prosperity and opportunity, and particularly in Glasgow's context, around about the very uneven health and social outcomes that the city has. And also I would pause at this point to say, I think we have to look at not losing sight of the importance of designing places and the community's role within that. So in terms of the need for ongoing resilience, Glasgow has been a city of transformation. It was post-industrial. I think we currently refer to ourselves as being proto-knowledge now, particularly in terms of competing at a national, European and global level, because there's an hypothesis that we compete in Scottish terms along with Edinburgh and Aberdeen. I think that Irene probably alluded to that perhaps in the introduction at the front end. And historically, because of scale, we are a city of places. The city's urban journey has had a legacy which impacts upon our ability to have current responses. As a result of past activity, there are a number of major constraints across the city in terms of what's under the ground. That impacts upon place quality, impacts upon people's health outcomes. Conversely, some opportunities are created with, for example, sustainable heat and energy extraction from former mine workings in the east end of the city. The city has a high level of green space, but that's not always well located or of appropriate quality. The city also benefits from a hugely rich Victorian and Edwardian architectural legacy, which is largely positive, but does impose financial challenges in terms of the solutions that we actually achieve. The legacy of that structural change has had spatial impact, with vacant and derelict land comprising, in terms of proximity, 60% of our population within 500 metres of derelict and vacant sites. So that impacts upon many of our 20-minute neighbourhoods. Stalled spaces started in Glasgow, and I would argue in terms of the intergenerational impact and health impacts of some of this vacant and derelict land, that we require an uptick, a structural change in that type of programme to ensure that we don't have the impacts of these types of sites upon our populations and places. The City Development Plan, as adopted in 2017, is place-based. It's underpinned by a green, vibrant, sustainable and connected city, and it seeks a healthy, sustainable place to deal with some of these health outcomes that are referred to. If you take a look at this NHS slide here, which I've borrowed, the health inequality expresses itself if you move from Hindland in the West End across to Carlton in the East End, just over 4 miles, but 14.3 years off the lifespan of a male and 11.7 years off the lifespan of a female. So quite spatially differential, caused by the physical consequences of our places. The city worked with the NHS and Sir Harry Burns in the East End on the Equally Well test site, which led to the development of the place standard, and does, I think, empower stakeholders to have a platform for place solutions and assisted in the development of the place standard. I would suggest that the 20-minute neighbourhood is probably the latest lens upon that, and I think some of the previous comments, I think, have fully covered that already. The open space strategy element of the City Development Plan is intended to deliver a network of open spaces that means that all residents have access and connectivity to the right amount and quality of multifunctional open spaces that can serve multiple purposes. Glasgow's leading through ECOST, the EU nature-based solutions that are set out within the strategy, and we look towards a repurposing of some open space and development of further open space within the compact urban city form. During lockdown, I think we've all reflected upon the importance of that. For example, there's a good degree of fuel poverty in the city, and a programme has existed to try and embed heat exchange equipment on balconies and flats, which I think we're giving pause to reflect upon, given the importance of some of these areas during restricted access times. The spatial guidance and design is at the heart of the city development plan. It works at a number of levels, which you can see on the right-hand side of that slide. The 20-minute neighbourhood probably works at the local development framework area, which is the third one down on the right. But what do you do in terms of rolling that out across the city? Because at the present time, we focus upon areas of priority and priority change. The spatial strategy overall includes for a compact city form, but when much of the land is heavily contaminated, how do you do that? Plus the market economics of private housing delivery, where infrastructure costs can be lower out with the city, as against city sites where there's underground contamination and infrastructure issues. If we look across to the Commonwealth Games Village in Dalmarnock as an example of a 20-minute neighbourhood, it was a heavily contaminated site with low-end values, and the Commonwealth Games provided an event-based opportunity to secure a regeneration there. National status really helped in terms of coordinating across the silos. If you looked at things like Scottish Power Underground and cables, upgrade of the local railway station, Sport Scotland taking a strategic approach towards open space, Forestry Commission investing across the administrative boundary in South Lanarkshire with Clyde Gateway developing a bridge over there. But not everyone's got a development agency like Clyde Gateway. As well, I'd say that one of the challenges was at that time we did not have place-based principle alignment of budgets. So although we had a master plan, it took us another 4 years to actually deliver a primary school, although we had developed a nursery school and a care home. Equally as well, the city ensured it was sustainable through combined heat and power, but that still has major tax issues through non-domestic rates from the value of construction as against utility costs for other domestic rate situations. Plus, in terms of funding, the Strathclyde Pension Fund had to actually take over the long-term funding of this as a result of the market conditions for funds. Looking at examples amongst our 44 town centres, this is Shoreham Square on the south side, award-winning. It's a community-led design process which I think is hugely beneficial on the back of a town centre initiative and bid. There's still detailed issues though there in terms of the telecom code system operators landing pieces of kit in accordance with their legal rights, which make things far from smooth. Across in Govan, Town Centre Action Plan, award-winning the RTPI Silver Jubilee Cup in 2014. But there's very long timescales for regeneration. The community-based partnership had its origins 17 years ago and is still a work in progress. There are live issues including the delivery of a city deal funded walking and cycling bridge to the West End, global climate change leading to rising sea levels on the Clyde and affecting development sites, and the need for long-term funding. This particular project's been through two iterations of heritage lottery funding, and where's the next funding coming from? And what of the city centre? It's an international metropolitan focus, but how resilient has that been through the lens of the 20-minute neighbourhood over the last wee while? The city centre population is roughly half that of the other UK cities of equivalent size. Getting housing into there is extremely tricky in terms of legal issues and physical issues. So what tools are there for increased residential population? We're a housing investment authority rather than operating our own council housing stock. Sighthill is one of the biggest regeneration sites in the city and in Europe, 50 hectares to the north of the NH.
There's a little time for questions. Apologies.
So it will be 10 minutes from George Square on the back of us de-risking the site and then allowing for the private sector to come in on the back of that. Investment around the city, round about Carlton Barrows, Anderston, Hamilton Hill and Lauriston. And conversion of former use of police horse stables just off the high street. But the housing investment budget is being cut in half from next year. So that is another issue. And given the city's functionality and scale, we need to drive economic vibrancy and regeneration. Barclays campus at Trayston, all this is under construction just now, delivering up to 7,000 jobs and build to rent. But build to rent has proven to be, to this point in time, a very difficult thing in terms of actually achieving it on the ground. Across the river, the IFSD is very successful economically, but without an embedded residential population, it still struggles to achieve place quality. And here's a very relevant quote, I think, that's relevant for all of us, made by one of my colleagues. Resilient cities and places are very much aligned with the latest prism of the 20-minute neighbourhood. And finally, relative to ongoing challenges for our neighbourhoods, if you look at this particular slide here, in the foreground, the Scottish Events Campus, major economic driver for the city, and also drive things like Finnieston, one of the hippest urban areas in the UK. But how do we adapt that campus and make it more resilient in the light of current challenges? The education sector in the background there, we've got 130,000 students in the city. How will they be impacted by distance learning and the risks to a stream of global students? Overall, we have a need to embed resilience through city policy coordination and operationalise that through the place principle. We also need recognition that long-term place solutions require longer-term priorities and budget alignment from national level through to local policies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Forbes. Really valuable and very practical examples of what can be getting done in cities. And I like your reference to it not just being about a city, but being about a city of places with 44 town centres to be thinking about. We haven't got a vast amount of time for questions. There is one that I would like to just take and answer myself. I'm the chair, I can do that, you know. Hussein, your question about how do we ensure that there's full accessibility for people walking, wheeling and cycling. Recent work that I've been involved in, that I've been tweeting about today and that is available on the Improvement Service website, goes into just the process that allows us to make sure that we think about different population groups when we're looking at a 20-minute neighbourhood. It's called Comparing 20-minute neighbourhoods with Traditional Scenarios, and it was us doing a very rapid scoping assessment of City of Edinburgh Council's local development plan and how they are progressing with looking at land densities, uses and a mix of housing to achieve more of a 20-minute neighbourhood. What I'd like to, so please everybody have a look at that, because it does show the importance of thinking about all groups of society as you're moving forward with a concept like this. I liked how you say all of you are referring to it as a concept. We do get hung up on, is it 15 minutes, 20 minutes? It is a lifestyle. It's a good way of putting it. The question that I was going to come through with, I was going to combine a couple and then come to each of you to answer on both of them, which is, there is a thing around, you know, there's 275 million gone towards place-based approaches. A lot of that's been linked in with 20-minute neighbourhoods, but a very good question around the fact that they are very short-term, that funding in its nature, when we're looking at a long-term issue. How do we deal with that? And then also, what is the role here for the regional spatial strategies that will be informing the national planning framework and feeding into that? What role to think about 20-minute neighbourhoods and those regional spatial strategies and up at that level? So I shall take you in order in which you spoke, Daisy, Stuart and then Forbes. So over to yourself first, Daisy. Thank you.
Thanks, Irene. Both really good questions. I mean, you can spend a long time unpicking both of them. But very quickly, I suppose, I think, you know, you cannot make a 20-minute neighbourhood or 15-minute city, whatever it is, without considering the impact of the region. You know, both ways. You know, the regional plan has on your neighbourhood and the other way around. So, for example, when I talked about the city centre transformation, we said from the beginning that you cannot pedestrianize the Royal Mile, as an example, without that being a regional solution to it. So, yeah, I think those two conversations have to go hand in hand. Your regional planning, regional transport has to be a part of how you plan your 20-minute neighbourhoods, not just in city centres, how they connect to your town centres as well. Regarding longer term funding, I mean, that's been something that in the active travel world, Stuart, we've worked really hard at constantly talking about how you cannot have ambitious plans, you cannot deliver ambitious programs on the ground if you're not able to plan for the next 3 to 5 years to 10 years. And walking and cycling needs to be seen as important as railways, for example, which gets funding for it's not year-on-year funding for if you're planning a railway track or railway project. So that's something that for us has been a critical part of the conversation. You need long-term funding if you want to have successful delivery on the ground.
Thank you, Daisy, and over to you, Stuart.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. We've just completed a piece of work on workplaces, in particular business parks, and I think that's the sort of place that at a spatial level we need to look at where are people working and how do they get between them. And I think Daisy would probably confirm there's a lot of traffic as waves within the urban area from one side of the city to the other. It's not just people coming out from out with. So we do need to work out how we connect those places up as well as the city centres. And I think city centres, we do need to keep the survival going of city centre public realm. They are nationally strategic projects. The public realm outside our main stations is not good. It's really not by European standards, and I mean nowhere good. So that's where I would put these strategies. We put a lot of money, and then we've also got retail areas. There's a question I think that somebody's asking about big box. And actually, we need to replace them. We just need to actually be right now and say we're going to replace them. That's not to say there might be something that's mixed use, that's higher quality, that's better. And they're already going in that direction in the States. And what's happening in the States will come our way. There's a good website if anybody's interested on dead malls, if you want to say. And what they have to do is repurpose them. So we might as well get proactive on that and say let's create. And the good thing is you've got lots of space. They're big concrete car parks and very low densities. There's lots of interesting stuff you could do at a spatial level.
Lovely, thank you. So there we go, Forbes. The 2 questions to you, plus can we have an LDP that reallocates all of your retail parks?
Okay, what am I doing after this week? So yeah, in terms of funding, I think it's to state the obvious that the longer time span for funding, the better. Looking at I think the Scottish Government just gave us some additional money for town centres funding, which has to be spent by the end of this financial year, which is challenging. In terms of the RSS issue that you mentioned there, Irene, I think there are so many cross-boundary issues which the RSS approach has to be a part of a bigger scale, but also a part of this as well. There are so many barriers to connectivity within urban areas and through natural topography, rivers, railways, major trunk roads have all been mentioned there, the A90, whether it was up in Elgin. These are all important issues for us to overcome in terms of securing that place issue. In terms of the retail park thing, I do actually wonder when you look at the extent of the structural change that's occurring in things like retail, we really can't envisage this level of change of having occurred. And I think that perhaps we will have to look at very radical options and look to North America, and some of their retail malls are have literally disappeared. So we'll have to repurpose them. So yeah, it's bring it on.
Thank you so much. We seem to manage to answer quite a few of the questions that have come in one fell swoop there, which is fortunate because we've really run out of time for any further ones. I think it's very interesting that we've ended on talking about those retail parks and town centres. I'm about to move on now to the Town Centre Review Group later on today, where they've already asked us to talk about the 20-minute neighbourhood assessment report that we've published. And that was planning and health practitioners working together, pulling together their experience and their evidence to give some recommendations on how we move forward with these 20-minute neighbourhoods and continue that collaboration together. So I thank our speakers, to Daisy, to Stuart and to Forbes. Thank you for sharing your expertise, for giving us some very practical examples of what has happened, for what we could be doing and applying across all of Scotland, and for a little bit more clarification that this isn't just about cities. This is about, even if it is a city, it's a city of places, and this is about our places across Scotland, not just a city issue. Thank you everybody who's tuned in. All of these sessions are being recorded. I've had a few folks asking, and it's lovely. It's been a range of health improvement managers to head of planning saying, can we catch up and watch these later and circulate them? Yes, they will be getting put up on the RTPI website during this week actually, so that's fantastic. And you'll be able to rewatch or just pass something on if you felt that there's somebody else out there that would maybe benefit from a little bit of a listen. So with that, thank you everybody, go safe, and goodbye for now from RTPI Scotland. Bye bye.